Are we raising mentally weak kids because there's a culture now of like helping them too much?
I don't mean this in a negative way, and people will take it this way. But kids are soft these days. They're not resilient, and because their parents.
I laugh because
their parents
I say that to my boys.
They are coddled.
Well, their parents don't want them to.
I'm like, you're in a bubble.
If you haven't moved out of your parents' house by 25, you're a failure. And the reason you're a failure isn't because you still live at home. It's because you've never even tried to move out.
I grew up with everything. Thank the Lord, just like you grew up with everything.
Okay.
Son, you don't know how we were eating back in our days? We're using $10 of gas in our car, eating ramen noodle soups.
Can I go to the freaking store and buy a can of Coke for 15, 25 cents anymore?
The difference is back then they were making $2 an hour.
Yeah.
Though.
From not moving out of their parents' home, to having high rates of anxiety, to having decision paralysis, Gen Zs are struggling to survive in the adult world. And I've noticed a trend where the older generation hears all of these things and they conclude, that the Gen Zs must not be working hard enough, that they're addicted to therapy and they were coddled too much as children. But none of these things address the real reason why Gen Zs feel so lost. So as a Gen Z, I'm here to break it down. Firstly, let's talk about this book. I think it started the conversation that Gen Zs have this unhealthy obsession with therapy and that it keeps them stuck in the past, preventing them from becoming adults. It's called Bad Therapy by Abigail Shrier. Now at first glance, you might think, wow, 4.6 stars, 1.6K reviews, best-selling author, it must be a great book. Well, yes, it does provide insight and of a possible unhealthy relationship with therapy and obsession with therapy. It drastically mischaracterizes the reality. The author, Abigail Shrier, has no previous experience working in therapy, has no education in therapy, so she really doesn't have any credibility to talk about how therapy impacts children. On top of that, this book has been reviewed by professional therapists who have cited that this book makes sweeping claims like this one that are then walked off without providing any factual evidence. And another therapist says, she is a columnist. She doesn't have to worry about being sued for malpractice. If a columnist writes something stupid or wrong and somebody dies as a result, nobody's going to sue. As a clinician, I operate in a different world. And it just takes one look at the bad reviews and you'd see this. All of that to say, this book has fed into people's echo chambers, making them believe that Gen Zs are struggling into adulthood today because they were coddled too much as kids, or that they were overly dependent on therapy, which made them stuck in the past, dwelling and stewing, instead of overcoming their trauma, and instead they're re-traumatized in therapy.
I never considered that thinking about your problems all the time and talking about your problems all the time literally make the problems grow.
That's right. I mean, it's the number one symptom of depression is what they call rumination, this pathological obsessing over your pain.
Yeah.
But I think it's more nuanced than just bad therapy or that they're lazy. I think what this book and a lot of commentators overlook when they make these arguments is the economy that Gen Zs were given when they entered the job market. We went to college, we got high grades, we got degrees, only to be told that no matter how hard we try at our 9 to 5s, it still wouldn't be good enough and we wouldn't own anything.
The Gen Zers own nothing. They don't want to own anything. Everything is a service. Cars are a service. Houses are a service. Everything is a service.
What about the Gen Zs who don't have full-time jobs, who are looking for work? Are they just unemployed bums?
And another thing, because this gets me heated, unless you've been on a job search in the last 2 years, you do not know how bad it is out here. The job market is trash. Basura, it's been bad. I'm talking about applying to 20 jobs a day, reaching out to recruiters, doing this on LinkedIn, and hearing crickets.
So is it just a feeling that there are no jobs out there, or is Gen Z actually facing an employment problem? According to StatsCan, Canadian graduates between the ages of 15 and 24 are facing the highest unemployment rate this country has seen since the mid-90s.
Guess who's applied to 200 different jobs and has gotten 0 replies yet? I feel like you have a better chance of making $1 million business from scratch than get a minimum wage job in this job market.
I've applied, I think, for every job on earth. I've sent 1 million messages, followed up, begged, nothing.
So 60% of last year's college graduates have still not landed an entry-level role. And You know, you hear about people all the time on this app that are applying to food service jobs. They're college graduates. They're applying for food service, and they're not even getting a call back. They're applying to minimum wage call centers, and they're not getting a call back.
The reality, at least for Canada anyway, is that the unemployment rate for young adults, for youth, ages 15 to 24, has been increasing, and the number of job vacancies have been decreasing. This makes it increasingly more difficult for young adults, ages 15 to 24, to get full-time work. And long-term youth unemployment is higher than ever. And statistics aside, there are real-life people that are impacted by this. Faraz Khorsandi, a 28-year-old graduate of 2024 from university with a master's degree in civil engineering. He's been looking for full-time work for more than a year now. Quote, I'm just basically relying on the money that I've had set aside for myself, but the game plan is if I run out of options, I would start looking for jobs as a server or go back to retail. Natasha Sogaroli, a graduate from McGill University, one of the top universities of Canada, struggled to find steady work. And rather than wait around, she at 23 years old wrote a book to help teenagers navigate the ups and downs of life. Iman Khwaja, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but she's 25 years old. She has a master's degree in English and Spanish from the University of Edinburgh, has applied to both Canada and jobs in Europe, but she still hasn't found full-time work, even with a master's degree. Quote, I don't feel like the formal education has paid off as an investment that I made in myself and my career. Even if Gen Zs do manage to get jobs, they're the first to get fired. And to make it even worse, entry-level roles barely pay livable wages in big cities anymore. God knows when I graduated, my first full-time job did not, so I stayed with my parents. But some may view that as just not growing up. Deloitte's 2023 Gen Z and Millennial Survey found that yes, people are delaying major life milestones into adulthood, but not because they don't want to, it's because nearly half of the respondents are living paycheck to paycheck, and many of them need to take on secondary jobs just to make ends meet.
Good morning, guys. Come to work with me as a young mom working 2 jobs while also having a small cleaning business on the side. Today I work at Dunkin' Donuts from 4 to 7 a.m. Then I go to the dental office from 8 to 5. Then I go to my cleaning job from 5 to 7. So come work with me.
And this year's Deloitte's 2025 survey found that cost of living remains Gen Z's #1 concern. And mind you, this survey had 14,000 Gen Z respondents from across 44 different countries. And this financial stressor of cost of living has caused 1/3 of Gen Zs and millennials to take on secondary jobs. To say that Gen Zs lack maturity or motivation is misrepresentative of the whole truth. That may be the case for 1 or 2 people, but that doesn't mean you can make sweeping generalizations. And we see this bleed into other aspects of Gen Z's life, like their mental health.
I'm seeing Gen Z talk about life lately, and honestly, I feel it in my chest, bruh. I feel it. Especially the 2000 babies. I am seeing it. Asking, what's the point? What's the point? What are we working towards? Why are we working nonstop just to barely get by? I feel it. It's heavy. And I'm scrolling through the comments, and everybody's saying the same thing. You know, I'm tired. I feel this sense of doom. Nothing feels real anymore. Not just talk, right?
I thought being in your early 20s was like supposed to be fun. I see all these bitches having so much fucking fun. I am miserable. Miserable. To my core miserable. What the fuck? This shit sucks.
For jobs so I can pay my fucking rent and not go negative, and I can't find any jobs that are gonna pay me. Only 2. There were 300 jobs today, and I could only find like I can only find 2.
Now, some people may look at her clip and think, oh my god, I need to take care of her, I will help her during the job application process. But that feeds into the narrative that they're coddled and that they're babies and they can't grow up. And on that note, this clip went viral, sparking the debate on how far too far is when it comes to parental support. Now, don't get me wrong. If you're Gen Z and you're 20 years old and your parents are writing your job application for you, writing your resume, writing your cover letter, coming with you during job interviews, then yeah, I think that could be a detriment and hindering you from becoming independent. But I also believe there's a fine line between having empathy for Gen Zs and their situation versus doing everything for them. Just as there's a fine line between understanding their struggles and completely blaming them and writing them off as just being lazy.
Are we raising mentally weak kids because there's a culture now of like helping them too much, doing too much for them?
This generation is the most in trouble in history. And we have to really ask ourselves why. From the food we feed them to the devices they look at, to the negative news, the polarization.
Gen Zs are known to be one of the most anxious and depressed generations, and statistics show this. But to make the claim that Gen Zs prove that therapy doesn't work because they're still mentally unwell confuses awareness with instant solutions. Think of anti-smoking campaigns. Did it take 1, 2, or even 5 years for everyone to stop smoking and lung cancer numbers to completely drop? No, it took many decades. And Gen Zs are doing the same thing with mental awareness. It's a cultural shift. It takes time. And more than that, the reason why Gen Zs feel more anxious than ever is because the life they were promised was a lie. I would love to have a home. I would love to have a kid, have multiple kids, be able to send them to college and earn enough to do that. But based on the economic trends, all of those things are becoming further and further out of reach for me, even with my full-time job. And that affects my mental health. So when Gen Zs find it difficult to afford groceries, and they see that their income isn't going up as much as their rent is, and they see skyrocketing housing prices, throw in climate change and political unrest, of course, they're going to go to the cheapest form of dopamine, and that's junk food and social media. And that in turn fuels comparison, which makes them feel bad about themselves, which in turn makes them feel mentally unwell. It's a very vicious cycle. And when this vicious cycle is happening almost every single day, no wonder they sometimes lack motivation, because it feels like the game is rigged against them. Blaming Gen Zs for struggling in this economy is like blaming someone for coughing in a smoke-filled room.
Well, Gen Z is pissed at us boomers, and I can't say that I blame them. There was an article that came out the other day that said you would have to have 5 minimum wage jobs to live in Austin, Texas, to afford the rent there. It's ridiculous. So those of you who say, well, back in 1980, I made $15 an hour and I bought a house. Well, guess what? Adjusted for inflation, your $15 an hour that you made in 1980 would now be over $112,000 a year. You know, most young people I meet, they want to work. A lot of people say, oh, the new generation doesn't want to work and they're lazy. No, that's not true. They're smart. They're smarter than us. They just don't want your crappy $15 an hour job.
Very quickly, I want to talk about why Gen Z is struggling. So I was born in the year 1999. A lot of people feel like it's not worth it to work anymore. They feel like, you know, it's just like you're just being a slave to the 9-to-5 system and there's no way to break out. And that's exactly what's happening. We're in an economy now where it's like the middle class is vanishing. So being Gen Z, we no longer have that privilege of just being middle class and just working a job and just getting by. You now have to work multiple jobs to have multiple streams of income so you can stay ahead of the curve. Otherwise, you're gonna fall behind and you're gonna be poor.
Now, I don't only want to disparage and discount this book and all the other commentators that make this argument that Gen Zs are lazy or Gen Zs lack motivation or that they're dwelling in the past and they're dependent on therapy, which prevents them from growing up. I think they bring up a valid concern. Some Gen Zs may fall under this Peter Pan syndrome that don't want to grow up and are too dependent on their parents. Or they have an unhealthy dependent relationship with their therapist, which they should probably talk about with their therapist. But I don't think it's representative for the entire generation. And generalized claims like this one can mislead audiences to believe that the problems of a small subset of people is the case for the vast majority, when that is just not true. Okay, so unemployment's on the rise, job vacancies are dropping, and social media and junk food are frying the brains of young adults. And the game feels more rigged than ever with companies posting fake job listings. Should we just give up? No. And here's why. It's totally valid to feel sad that society has given you such a shitty hand, because they have. But nihilism is not going to get you anywhere. When you look at these statistics, don't think, damn, society has betrayed us, nothing matters, what's even the point anymore? Instead, think, wow, that many Gen Zs are still trying to make it despite the obstacles, despite what the world throws at them. That is not being lazy, that is empowering, that's inspiring. On the macro level, Gen Zs are struggling, but it's not for a lack of trying. Sure, there may be one-off people who don't try and they have dependencies that they need to resolve, but that's not the case and representative of the whole. We're not lazy, we're one of the most entrepreneurial generations. We're finding creative ways to monetize our hobbies and creating communities in ways that past generations could have never imagined. But I want to know what you think. Do you think Gen Zs have this problem where they're just dwelling in the past and that's re-traumatizing them, which is preventing them from growing up? Or maybe you think they were coddled too much as children and that's why they can't grow up. Or maybe it's just the economy. Let me know in the comments. And if you like this video, maybe subscribe, give it a like. I'm here every single week. We do commentary videos. I might do a film analysis. Who knows? We have a good time. Peace.